The distress signal lasted 11 seconds. Then silence, the kind that swallows whole star systems and leaves nothing behind but questions. Lieutenant Marcus Hale had been running perimeter scans above the Vethra corridor when the beacon tore through his cockpit instruments like a blade through silk. Not a human signal. Not anything in the Alliance registry. Something older. Something desperate. He didn't hesitate. That was the thing about Marcus, where other pilots calculated risk, he calculated cost. And leaving someone to die in the debris field of the corridor? That cost was too high. Before you see what he found out there, hit subscribe so you don't miss a single chapter of what happens next. His scout vessel punched through the asteroid cluster at speeds that made the hull groan. Warning lights bloomed across the console, proximity alerts, radiation spikes, structural stress readings creeping into the red. Marcus silenced every one of them. He had a bearing on the signal. That was enough. What he found changed everything. The ship was cathedral-shaped, long, silver, and devastatingly beautiful even in ruin. Its hull had been sheared open along the starboard side, venting atmosphere in crystalline plumes that caught the light of the corridor's twin dying stars like scattered diamonds. The markings were Rekhari. The royal markings. Marcus had read about the Rekhari the way most humans read about myth. A civilization so advanced they'd stopped building weapons centuries before humanity had figured out fire. 60 billion souls spread across 9 systems. Isolationist. Untouchable. Legendary. He was boarding their royal vessel. His magnetic boots connected with the exterior hull. The breach was wide enough, barely. He squeezed through into a corridor choked with emergency smoke. Navigation crystals shattered across the floor like broken promises. His suit's atmospheric scanner painted the interior in cold data. Oxygen levels dropping, structural integrity at 31%, and one life sign. 1. He followed it through 2 collapsed bulkheads, past a throne room that even half destroyed made him feel small in a way the entire galaxy never had. The carvings on the walls moved. Actual living murals, Rekhari bioart still functioning even as the ship died around them. Hunting scenes. Council chambers. Coronation. Marcus didn't have time to be awed. The life sign was weakening. He found her in what must have been the command sanctum, pinned beneath a collapsed support column. Her silver robe stained deep violet, Rekhari blood. His scanner confirmed, chemically distinct from anything human. She was conscious. Barely. Her eyes, when they opened, were the color of deep ocean water lit from beneath. She looked at him the way someone looks at the last impossible thing they expect to see before they die. A human. Marcus didn't speak Rekhari. He had 3 words of it from a cultural briefing he'd half-slept through 6 months ago. But the column was calculating its own. He could see the stress fractures spreading. He had maybe 90 seconds. He wedged his shoulder beneath the support beam, activated his suit's exo-assist, and pushed. Every tendon in his body sent protests up his spine. The beam shifted centimeter by centimeter until her arm came free, then her torso, then finally all of her. He caught her before she hit the deck. She said something. One word, soft and precise, that his translator rendered as approximately why. Marcus looked down at her, at the moving murals still dancing on the crumbling walls above them, at the twin dying stars visible now through the breach behind her, and he answered the only way he knew how. Because you needed help. He carried her out. He didn't know yet that she was the heir to the Rekhari throne. He didn't know that this moment had been observed by 17 different intelligence agencies across 4 star nations. He didn't know that by carrying her through that breach, he had just ignited a diplomatic crisis 600 years in the making. All he knew was that she was breathing, but someone else had been watching the crash site, and they weren't there to rescue anyone. She didn't trust him immediately. That was the first thing Marcus respected about her. He'd brought her aboard the Cal Lowell, his 2-person scout vessel out of the New Haven station above Massachusetts orbital, and watched the Rekhari princess regain consciousness with the precise, controlled alertness of someone who had been trained never to show weakness, not even to the person who just saved her life. She sat upright on the med bunk, assessed the room in 3 seconds, catalogued Marcus in 2 more, and said exactly 1 sentence. You will contact no one about my presence here. Not a request. Not a plea. A statement delivered with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to reshaping the universe through sheer certainty. Marcus handed her a hydration pack. Already my only plan. He pulled up the scanner results on the cockpit display, angling it so she could see. Your ship's gone. 12 minutes after I got you out. The core destabilized. Whatever hit you didn't want anything left. The information landed behind those ocean-deep eyes with visible weight. She absorbed it with the stillness of someone receiving catastrophic news through a wall of iron discipline. My name is Zelara Vel-Serath, she said finally. Air designate of the Rekhari consortium. Marcus sat in the pilot chair, facing her from across the small cabin.
Marcus Hale.
Lieutenant, Earth Alliance Scout Division. Currently not sure if I just started a war or ended one. Something moved across her face. Not quite a smile, but its shadow. Possibly both. She was injured. 3 broken ribs, a fractured resonance node along her left forearm, unique Rekhari anatomy that his medical kit had no protocol for, and a deep laceration across her shoulder sealed with the emergency foam he'd packed for situations that were never supposed to be this complicated. She didn't complain about any of it. She didn't even wince. But she watched him, carefully, constantly, the way you watch a variable you haven't solved yet. Marcus ran a passive scan on the corridor, keeping his hands moving, giving her space to breathe inside it. He was good at that, making room. His commanding officer back at New Haven, Captain Delilah Osei, had once told him it was his most useful quality and his most infuriating one in equal measure. Who destroyed your ship? He asked. Zelara was quiet for a long moment. When she finally answered, her voice carried the careful weight of someone releasing classified information and knowing exactly what they were. Releasing. The Rekhari Collective. Marcus had heard of the Rekhari the way you hear of a thunderstorm from 3 states away. Distant. Theoretical. A faction operating in the deep systems beyond Rekhari space. Rumored to oppose the consortium's isolationist policies through increasingly violent means. They were the ghost story that serious diplomats told each other when they thought no one was listening. They'd just tried to assassinate the heir to 60 billion people. We need to get you to safety, Marcus said. There is no safety. Zelara looked at him with something new in her eyes now. Not distrust exactly, but a profound and careful measuring. The Rekhari have agents in every station between here and Rekhari space. Any communication I send will be intercepted. Any vessel I board through official channels will be compromised within the hour. Then you travel unofficial. Marcus pulled up the NAV charts. I know every back route through the corridor. I've been running these lanes for 3 years. Why would you do this? Zelara asked. The same word she'd whispered in the ruins of her ship. But this time it wasn't fading and delirious. It was direct. Searching. Marcus met her gaze. Same reason as before. She looked at him for a long moment. Something in her expression shifted. Not dramatically, not like a revelation crashing through walls. Quieter than that, like a door that had been locked for a very long time deciding, for the first time, that the right key might exist somewhere. She looked away first. There is a Rekhari safe passage beacon, she said. Hidden in the debris field 17,000 kilometers east-northeast of our current position. If we retrieve it, I can signal my people through an encrypted channel the Rekhari cannot break. Marcus was already calculating the course. How long before they realize you survived? They may already know. He checked his scanners. The corridor behind them was empty, for now. But the Rekhari Collective didn't leave loose ends. And somewhere in those 17,000 kilometers of wreckage, something was already moving toward them, and it wasn't the beacon. They found the beacon. What they didn't expect was what it was hidden inside. The debris field had once been a Rekhari way station. Pre-isolation era, Zelara told him as they navigated through it, her voice taking on a different quality when she spoke of her people's history. Not the clipped authority of before. Something quieter and more careful. Something that sounded, Marcus thought, like love restrained by practice. The way station's core structure had survived centuries of drift and collision intact around a single preserve chamber. A Kethera, she called it. A quantum garden. Rekhari biology architecture. Living plants suspended in stasis fields. engineered to survive indefinitely without atmosphere, their bioluminescent foliage still pulsing soft gold and deep violet against the darkness of space. The beacon was nested at the garden's center, wrapped in root systems that had grown around it over 300 years. They had to go in to get it. Marcus had been in a lot of places in his 3 years running the corridor. He had never been anywhere that looked like this. The stasis field maintained a thin, breathable pocket at the chamber's core, not enough for extended exposure, but enough for 20 minutes with suits unsealed. Zelara moved through the garden's phosphorescent pathways with a certainty that told him she'd memorized descriptions of places like this the way humans memorize childhood geography. She touched nothing. She seemed almost afraid to. "My people built these," she said, "when we still believed the universe wanted to know us." Marcus stopped beside her at a cluster of suspended flowers, 6-petaled things that responded to proximity, leaning toward them both like slow curiosity made botanical. "What changed?" "We learned how often knowing something destroys it." She said it without bitterness. "Just wait." The particular weight of a civilization carrying an old wound. She isn't just isolated, Marcus thought. She's lonely, and she's been lonely so long she's stopped naming it. He didn't say that. He found the beacon instead, carefully extracting it from the root systems over 15 minutes while Zelara held the stasis field stable. She had to stand close. The beacon's extraction required 2 sets of hands, and the garden's central platform was narrow. He became aware of the precise distance between them in a way that had nothing to do with mission parameters. She became aware of it too. He could tell by the infinitesimal way she adjusted her posture, not away, but straighter, as though she was deciding how to carry the awareness with dignity. The beacon released with a sound like a single clean note struck on glass. "Pause. Marcus." She said his name for the first time without rank, without the distance of formal address. Just his name, in her precise Velhari accent that gave it an extra syllable somehow, made it sound like something that had always been 2 things at once. He looked at her. "In Velhari culture," she said carefully, "when someone retrieves a way station beacon, they are given a Vethra name, a second name. It is the name by which the garden knows you." She paused. "It is not a small thing. What would mine be?" She studied him, really studied him, the way she'd been doing since she woke on the Kal-Lol, but different now. The calculation was still there, but something warmer moved through it. "Relkatha," she said. "It means, approximately, the one who carries what cannot be asked for." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "That's a heavy name. You are proving to be a heavy person," she said. And then, small and entirely unguarded, she smiled. It was the first time. It hit Marcus somewhere below the sternum, and he made a careful note to not let that show on his face. They sealed the beacon and prepared to leave. The garden's bioluminescence pulsed around them in slow, even rhythms, like breathing, like a heartbeat, like something alive acknowledging them both. Marcus didn't know yet that Zelara had never given a Vethra name before, that in 300 years of Velhari tradition, it was offered only to those deemed worthy of being remembered by living things. He didn't know, but she had been hoping, since the moment she woke and found him standing there with a hydration pack and absolutely no political agenda, that someone worthy might exist. The Rekhari strike team waiting outside the way station didn't care about any of that. They had arrived 6 minutes ago. They were patient, and they had already sent one message, not to their commanders, but to a specific council within Velhari space. A council that, upon receiving it, convened in emergency session and made a decision that would reach Marcus Hale's cockpit within the hour. A decision that would force Zelara to choose between her throne and the first real thing she'd felt in years. The transmission came through on the encrypted beacon channel, which meant it should have been impossible. Only Zelara's personal authorization could have opened that frequency. Only someone inside the Velhari Inner Council would have known to send to it. She read it once. Then she stood very still for a very long time. Marcus had learned, in 4 days of close quarters aboard the Kal-Lol, that Zelara processed difficulty through stillness the way humans process it through motion. When she was calibrating something hard, she went quiet and precise and utterly opaque, and the only indicator that anything was happening behind those ocean-deep eyes was the way her left hand, the one with the fractured resonance node he'd splinted with a modified suit component, would flex slowly once, twice, like she was testing whether pain was still real. Her hand flexed 3 times. "What is it?" Marcus asked. She handed him the translation without a word. The council's message was elegant in the way that ultimatums from civilizations with 60 billion citizens tend to be elegant, brief, formal, and completely without mercy. The Rekhari strike team in the debris field had transmitted evidence of Zelara's survival along with the identity of her rescuer. The Council of Vel-Serath had convened under emergency charter. Their position was as follows. The heir designate could not be seen to have accepted aid from, traveled with, or developed any form of connection to an Earth Alliance officer. The political implications, given current tensions between the Velhari Consortium and the Alliance's expansion toward the corridor, were untenable. Zelara was to be extracted by a Velhari vessel dispatched to their coordinates within 6 hours. Marcus was to be detained for processing. And any bond of Vethra naming was to be formally dissolved and stricken from record. Zelara turned away from him to stare at the viewport. The debris field drifted past in slow silence. Broken ships, dead stations, the bones of old things. "They know," she said quietly, "about the naming. Is that a problem?" She exhaled. "A Vethra name is permanent. Cannot be legally dissolved. The council knows this. They are commanding something they know to be impossible under our own law." Marcus leaned forward, elbows on his knees, looking at the deck. "They're trying to force you to choose." "Yes. Between your throne and—" He stopped. Zelara turned back to him. Her expression was the most unguarded it had ever been, and that scared him more than the Rekhari outside, more than the strike team's patience, more than any of it, because it told him exactly what she'd been trying not to show him since the garden. "Between my throne," she said carefully. "And what is true?" The cabin was very quiet. Marcus stood. "I won't let them detain you. Whatever they say about me, I'll—" Marcus. His Vethra name, she'd told him, was the name by which living things remembered you. But she'd been using his human name, his first name, and the way she said it now, low, precise, stripped of every layer of royal composure, was something she had never said to anyone the same way before. He knew it somehow. He just knew. "I have lived my entire life," she said, "making decisions for 60 billion people. I have never made one for myself." "This one's yours," he said. "I won't take it. Even if the choice costs you your career, your rank." Earth Alliance will not be pleased to hear one of their lieutenants complicated an already fragile diplomatic situation. "My commanding officer is Captain Delilah Osei. She survived for worse situations than this, and I have never once seen her look pleased about anything. I think I'll manage." Zelara looked at him, and for the first time since the crash, since the garden, since 11 seconds of distress signal in the dark, something broke open in her expression. Not dramatically, not like a dam, more like a door opening. "I do not know," she said slowly, "how your species produces people like you. We've had a lot of practice being desperate," Marcus said. "Makes us resourceful." Almost against her will, she laughed, short and real and clearly startling to her, like a reflex she'd forgotten she had. But the Rekhari strike team was still outside. 2 vessels, the scanner confirmed, with a third now entering the corridor from the deep systems. The Velhari extraction ship was 6 hours away, and the Council's message had contained one line Marcus hadn't mentioned yet. A secondary transmission, buried in the authentication code, readable only by someone who knew where to look. "We have your homeworld's ambassador in protective custody. Comply or New Haven Station burns." The Velhari homeworld had no official name in any human registry. The consortium simply called it Veth, the center, and it announced itself through the viewport of the Cal Lowell as a planet that had decided once to be perfect and had then kept the promise across 10,000 years. 3 moons. Oceans the color of deep amber. Cloud formations that moved in the kind of deliberate geometric patterns that made Marcus's pilot instincts insist someone was flying them. The orbital ring above it was not infrastructure in any human sense. It was art, living and vast, the same bioarchitecture as the Waystation Garden but scaled to planetary circumference, bioluminescent and breathing with the slow rhythm of something that had been tended across centuries. 60 billion people lived there. And right now, Marcus Hale of New Haven Station, Connecticut, Earth Alliance Scout Division, was being escorted in a two-person scout vessel toward their front door. "You're doing the thing," Zelara said from the co-pilot seat. She had barely left it in the 6 hours since the extraction ship had provided them clearance and escort, choosing to remain aboard the Cal Lowell rather than transfer, a fact that the escort commander had noted with careful diplomatic blankness. "What thing?" "The thing where you go very quiet and I can see you processing the scale of something." Marcus exhaled. "I'm processing the scale of something. Tell me." He looked at her. In the amber light coming through the viewport, the bioluminescent quality of her skin that he'd noticed but never commented on. A Vel-Serath trait that intensified with emotion, he'd learned the way human faces flush with blood, was visible in a low, steady gold. It had been doing that for approximately the last 6 hours. Since the laughter in the debris field. She hadn't mentioned it. He hadn't either. "I'm thinking," he said carefully, "that 6 days ago I was running a standard perimeter scan, and now I'm about to become the first human being to stand on Vel-Serath soil. And I want to do it correctly because it matters and I don't entirely know what correctly looks like." Zelara was quiet for a moment. Then she reached across the console and placed her hand over his, deliberate and precise the way she did everything. Brief, but there. "In Vel-Serath tradition," she said, "when someone crosses a threshold for the first time, they do not cross it alone. They are accompanied by someone who knows what waits on the other side." She removed her hand. "I will walk in with you. Is that normal? For the air designate to?" "No," she said simply. "But the Council has already reviewed this day for precedent violations. I suspect one more will not register significantly." The escort ships formed a corridor ahead of them. Below, Veth turned in its ancient light. The landing platform was at the high garden tier of the Capitol complex. Open sky, that amber ocean visible to the east, the orbital ring catching the morning light above them in shifting geometric fire. A council reception line waited. Diplomats, advisors, the senior member who had sent the message about the Vethra name. They were formal and careful in assessing, the way people are when history is being made in front of them and they're not entirely sure yet whether it's the good kind. Marcus walked in beside Zelara. She had told him once that her people had built quantum gardens when they still believed the universe wanted to know them, and then learned how often knowing something destroys it. He understood that now in a way he hadn't when she'd said it. 60 billion people behind walls they'd built out of something that had started as wisdom and calcified across centuries into something lonelier. And here he stood, one human being, in a borrowed suit with a hull stress indicator he'd been ignoring, carrying a name that living things had given him. The senior council member spoke first. A formal welcome in Vel-Serath, then, in careful standard, the translation, "Lieutenant Hale, the consortium thanks you for the service rendered to the air designate. You are recognized as Relkatha under the permanent record of the Vethra naming convention. This is not a small thing." "I'm beginning to understand that," Marcus said. A pause moved through the council. And then the senior member did something that Zelara later told Marcus she had never seen in 40 years of council service. She smiled. Wide and genuine. The kind of smile that breaks through ceremony like light through old hull plating. "She speaks of you well," the senior member said quietly. "For a Vel-Serath who does not speak of anything." Zelara, standing beside him, did not look at him. But the bioluminescence along her jaw went unmistakably, warmly gold. Afterward, after the council reception, after the formal registration of Marcus's diplomatic status, after the particular kind of exhaustion that comes from 6 days of adrenaline finally deciding it's safe to leave, they walked through the high garden tier alone. The bioart murals here were older than the way station by centuries, and they moved the same way, hunting scenes and councils and coronations alive in the walls. Zelara stopped at a garden junction where 3 paths met beneath a canopy of suspended flowers. The same 6-petaled species from the way station, grown large and permanent here, bending toward them both with that slow, curious lean. "Marcus." "Yeah." "There is a Vel-Serath tradition," she said, and he recognized the cadence now, the way she deployed tradition like a key to rooms she'd never let anyone enter before. That when someone speaks a Vethra name for the first time in the permanent gardens, the naming is considered complete. Witnessed by living things. recorded by the garden's memory. She turned to face him. Relkatha, she said. The one who carries what cannot be asked for. Marcus looked at her. At the careful, luminous, magnificently controlled person who had been dismantling her own walls one precise brick at a time since the moment she'd woken up on his med bunk and decided, against every instinct of a lifetime's training, to trust him. Zelara, he said, what's the tradition for when someone wants to stay? She looked at him for a long time, long enough that the flowers bent further, as though they were waiting too. They ask, she said softly, and the garden listens. Then I'm asking. The amber light moved across the garden. The orbital ring caught fire above them in the morning. 60 billion people lived their lives on the other side of these walls, and beyond them, humanity went about the business of surviving its remarkable, relentless existence. And somewhere, Captain Delilah Osei was absolutely going to need Marcus Hale's incident report before the end of the week. But in the high garden tier of Veth, the flowers leaned toward them both, and the living walls remembered, and the air designate of the Rekhari consortium reached out and took his hand. Not briefly, not with the precision of formality, but with the quiet and complete certainty of someone making a decision, at last, entirely for herself. They stood there a long time, just two people at the threshold of something neither of their civilizations had vocabulary for yet. That was all right. They had time to build it. That's where we leave Marcus and Zelara, standing at the beginning of something that could change two civilizations forever. If this story reached you, drop a comment below. What moment hit you hardest? And subscribe, because the universe Marcus just walked into is only getting bigger.